And welcome Gladys, welcome Dawn, welcome Maria, just kind of welcoming people as they're popping in. Um, and you're right in time because we're just about to do our formal start right now. So I want to say a few words about the Co-Intelligence Institute and then say a few words about this monthly series. So the Co-Intelligence Institute is a nonprofit focused on promoting innovations in collective wisdom, co-creativity, and collaborative governance. And what that means is that we develop tools and resources, including pattern languages, that help individuals and communities to live in kinship with one another and with the rest of the natural world. So as part of this, we love to really feature what other people are doing with regards to collective wisdom and choice making. And so we really focus on exploring, gathering, and sharing real world innovations through articles, books, and case studies. That's what we're doing here. So that's one aspect of our work. We also collaborate with other initiatives within the larger change ecosystem. We seek to contribute and learn from our collaborations while encouraging a greater understanding of the whole. So we'll often have like brainstorming sessions with people who are developing projects and things like that. Kind of doing some shadow consulting behind the scenes. And last but not least, we welcome people into learning communities, again, like on this call today, where we can all deepen our understanding of co-intelligence and wise democracy, which are the two central constructs that we work with. So the purpose again is to develop our collective capacity for wise relating and living well with each other, and to help share our lenses of co-intelligence and wise democracy. Tom is a key part of these calls where after I interview our honored guest today, Beth Tener, Tom will be offering a short piece on theory and patterns. The bit I want to say here is that on-the-ground practice and experimentation is what has inspired co-intelligence theory and wise democracy pattern language. And so because of this, examples from practice can serve to illustrate different aspects of the theory. And so we want to center practice and also offer the theory and the patterns as tools to generalize the insights we gain from experience. And of course, whenever we generalize, we need to be careful about the importance of context and whatever. We can't just take a principle and apply it willy-nilly wherever. But there is a role for abstract thinking in all this, even as we center practical knowledge. So in a moment, I'm going to be so now I want to just take a moment to describe the flow. So I'm going to be interviewing Beth, then we're going to be hearing from Tom, and then we're going to be going into short breakout groups. And then, small breakout groups. They're not going to be that short. We want to give you enough time to really get to know each other a bit and explore some ideas. And so when you are listening to Beth and to Tom, I invite all of you to be considering the following questions. And if you want to make some notes for yourself, et cetera, to then share in your breakout group, that's fine too. So really basic questions like, how does this relate to your own experiences? And what connections do you see with your own work? What is it in places or practices that you know that can generate this kind of powerful experience that Beth is going to share with us? This question is specific to her presentation. Has done some very powerful work on diversity and inclusion in a different way in a particular conference that she's going to be talking about. And so the invitation is, what do you know that can also generate this kind of powerful experience so that we can, add to our experience base? And then the last is simply, what do you have questions about or would love to hear more about? So after Beth and Tom, then we'll go into the breakout groups, and then we'll come back and you'll all share with whatever you would like with folks here. So with that, Beth, I want to introduce Beth by saying I've known Beth for a while. She has a very, very impressive background because she's a systems thinker, and she's done a lot of really awesome work helping networks that are helping to develop the transition to regenerative culture in different aspects, whether it's energy or education or there's different aspects of the work. Oh, thank you, Andy. You're putting the questions for participants in chat. Thank you. So Beth has done a lot of accompanying, supporting, facilitating, guiding powerful networks, food systems, food security systems. And so she has done a whole lot beyond what we're going to have the opportunity to focus on here, because our intention with these calls is to kind of take a case study of something and be able to delve into it a little bit more. And so her most recent work is what she's going to be focusing on. And with that, Beth, I just want to invite you to share a little bit about this conference that you helped to, well, that you co-designed and co-facilitated and initiated. This was, as I understand, really your inspiration to create this exploration of how the arts can support diversity and inclusion. So with that, I'm just going to invite you to share a few words, and then yeah, go ahead.
Everyone, and thank you, Rosa and Andy and the team here. And I've been a fan of Tom Atlee's work since back to probably 1990, and it's informed a lot of my thinking and work. So it's really wonderful to have a chance to all talk shop and unpack this story together. Yeah, so just a little background of context and place. So I live in southern New Hampshire, about an hour from Boston, and we call it the Seacoast area, which is right between the border to Maine. And I have been really interested in how we gather groups and bring people together for difficult conversations, and like, how do we bring racial equity, diversity of all sorts, like how are we doing that work in the embodied in how we design things, so that it's like the ethic is you get to experience what diversity can do, rather than just like having big difficult talks about the problems. Like, how do we live into being together in ways that show what's possible on the other side of, the oppressions, or untangling them. So this story, it's called the SeaCHANGE conference, SeaCHANGE. And I have been getting into relationship with a local group, a Baha'i Faith Learning Center that's just over the border from Portsmouth, over the Piscataqua River in Elliott, Maine. And it's a facility that's been there for over 100 years, hosting dialogues, and lots of luminaries come, like the Yogananda came, who was the first guy that brought yoga to the States, came there. And they've done a lot with racial amity and connectedness. So they held a racial amity conference there in 1916. It's pretty amazing. So the Greenacre, we'd been starting to work together, and they wanted to put on a conference about the arts and healing. And at the time, they had a young man, Najee Brown, who had been an artist in residence there and was bringing his plays and other kind of dialogue events to Greenacre. And so the two of them got talking and said, let's put on our own conference. They'd been to other conferences, and they really wanted to do it in a different way. And that's where they got me engaged, because I love designing really participatory events. So with that was kind of where it started. And we knew we wanted to be about the arts, and we wanted to center Black, Indigenous, people of color artists. And Najee had traveled to Europe, where he could just see the art scene there was so different, the way artists were supported and the social supports compared to, he's from Brooklyn, compared to what we were doing in the States. And I should also just say, context-wise, of this part of the country, it's a place where there's not a lot of diversity. Like, it's about 90-95% white. So it's a place we need more diversity, and it's kind of tense once you get started. It always feels like you kind of put that in the room and everyone's like, oh God, we got to talk about it, So I think with this, we were just like, how can we put on something that has a different feel to it? And So I worked with them. We created a design team with Najee, Robert, me, and another woman on their staff, Jessica. Is this the right pace, Rosa, to tell the story? Is it okay? Okay. And so we worked as a design team, and when I work with people to design something, we just spend a lot of time in that process of what are the questions we want to be exploring at the event? What do we want the event to do? But we actually find getting to the right strategic question is actually itself a really useful process to hone, what is it that the group can open up and talk about, and also what will attract people to those questions. And so I can share, we ended up landing on 3 questions. This is a picture here. This is actually a picture of the conference, just so you can see Greenacre as this lovely big meeting space. And we had a 3-day event. It ended up being, and probably about 40 people each day. So it wasn't huge. And we ended up landing on these 3 questions, and we made 1 question for each day. So how can the arts be used for healing and social change was day 1. Day 2 is how can we amplify how BIPOC artists work. And day 3 got to how do we create resource-rich environments for artists and grow how we use the arts and healing for healing and social change. So the flow kind of, each day we had 1 question. And then what was also really special is through Najee's networks of people he knew and stuff, he was able to get other colleagues and young people his age in the arts to invite their friends and colleagues. So the space, and then Greenacre had a lot of events over there where local people trusted the place. So we actually ended up having a very diverse group in the room, which doesn't happen all that often here. So you just felt it right when you walked in, like, wow, this feels like a different kind of scene. And then the way we structured the day, each day followed a similar pattern of some kind of movement. The first day was a land tour and land acknowledgement and grounding you in the history of the place. And then day 2 and day 3 both had 45 minutes of dance led by this amazing dance instructor. So sort of meditative dance. So get everyone really centered. And then we would do a panel of 3 or 4 people. Is this okay, Rosa, or do you want to pause? I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. I would love to reflect back a little bit.
I'll pause there. Okay.
Yeah, so the piece that I just wanted to underline for a moment is that you mentioned how whoops, I was trying to keep you.
No, that's good.
Highlighted. Okay, anyway, you mentioned that there was a balanced group. That's not always so easy to do. So I just wanted to affirm that and the value of that you were able to do that. Yeah. And then you had talked about having a question for each day, and then you were starting to go into the activities for each day. So if you could bring us back in through day 1.
Yeah. And so each day, and what we did with that, people could come for all 3 days, but we also said if you could just come for 1 or 2 days, that's fine too. So that also allowed us to get more folks to come. And so the first day, so I was saying we do movement, and then we'd have a panel with a moderator, and we just take the question to the panelists, invite them to share a story. And that went for about half an hour. And we did that within the circle. So we had a big circle of 40 chairs, and the panelists were kind of within the circle. And then we would invite the audience to become, have the conversations themselves. So the same question, we called it a fire starter panel, just to spark their thinking. So it wasn't really like someone on the stage talking. It was just, you're part of the circle.
Okay, so can I make sure I'm understanding this? So this fire starter model, you have your panel as part of the circle. They share a story in response to the question, which I think is also really powerful, right? Because you're not asking for just a lecture, you're asking for a story, and stories can be such powerful conveyors of meaning. And then you said, and then you had the participants speak about the issue. Did you have them in small groups, or did they stay as part of the circle, or?
They went, I'll tell that part in a minute. They went to small groups. But one other part of that thing of being in the circle, the first panel, day 1, several of the people just kind of went vulnerable quickly in their honesty about what it was like to live in New Hampshire as a person of color, or the arts, how the arts saved them through a lot of trauma, whatever it was. And I think the quality of the relationships of who got invited and new people, or the space and the loyal, having been in the space before and knowing it's safe, it went deep fast. And a friend of mine who's a man of color lives in this area. Like, he told me later, he was like, what's happening here? This isn't, this doesn't usually happen. I can't believe we're talking like this already. So, yeah, so after that panel, we invited people, we use a process called 1, 2, 4 all, which is from Liberating Structures. So we asked people to reflect on their own on the question, like, how can the arts be used for healing and social change? They think for themselves, then they get into a 1 pair for 5 minutes, and then those pairs join another pair for 5 minutes, or 10 minutes or something. So it's a nice way to build up. And then everyone's talking about the same question and meeting people and having deeper conversations. And then we would have a long lunch, and it's a beautiful campus. People can hang out. And then each afternoon we did a variety of arts related workshops, and people could choose which ones to go to. Some were dance, some were art. And then the other part of the real magic of it is that then at the around 3:30 or 4, we came back to the big group and we did open space. And so this, I would just really light touch. Okay, who wants to talk about what? Get the topics on each written out, whatever topic you wanted. And then, okay, you guys go to the front porch with Victoria. If you want to talk about this, you guys go here. You can move if you want, but with your feet. And that structure just allowed all the stuff that got percolating in the morning and in the workshops and at lunch could just find a lot of places to go. And I have a specific anecdote about that, but I'll pause there, Rosa, and see.
Yeah.
And we did that same cycle all 3 days.
Yeah. So you came up with this very powerful cycle of having this panel that was part of the circle, then doing the 1, 2, 4 all on the same question, so that everybody got to explore the same question. And long and leisurely lunch, workshops in the afternoon, followed by open space. It sounds very potent, very simple, and very powerful.
Yeah. And it was that balance in the art of hosting, which is one of the lineages that I really draw on and have been taught by, is this, they could talk about the chaos order, the chaotic path. So what's enough structure and what's enough spaciousness? And so Victoria, who's a young woman, she's probably in her 30s, sort of combination of Mexican, Black, Indigenous heritage. And she's quite a person. And she was on my podcast about this. And she said, just the freedom of open space where you're invited to go where you want. And if it's not working and you want to go somewhere else, go there. And she said there was just this feeling of the space where you had space and time, and you had the freedom to offer your own topic and to take the time you need. And it just is an embodiment of, that giving people space rather than everything's highly structured and you're expected to be in your chair and the agenda's thought out months in advance, right? So that was like an embodiment of diversity, creativity, connecting in new ways. Yeah.
And at the same time, you had this beautiful way of having everybody be responding to the same question in the morning. There's that balance of shared experience and then open space. Lovely. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the outcomes of
Yeah, so the story one of the favorite stories we all tell about the open space part. I'll just go back to this. So I think, just to reiterate why I love the questions, I often think of questions as sort of like the banks of the river that bound the conversation. So that day, one of the days, I forget, I think it was the second day, there's what the Greenacre facility does is they do an art show every 6 months. So we had an art exhibit on the wall. I think it was Afrofuturism. So there's paintings throughout the facility. And so Robert, the ED, did a tour of the art, an art tour as one of the workshops. He ran it twice. And so they were going around looking at the pictures. And this particular painting by Arya Badian, when the first time they went around, there was several women of color and other women there, and they were like the hair, something about this, the freedom of the hair and how it went all the way to the edges of the frame. It just really captured their imagination and their spirit. And they got into this great conversation about it. And Robert just kind of stepped back and said, I'll let you guys lead, like, take it where you want, you know? And then the second time they did it, 3 more African-American women were there who also just got to that painting and just had so much to talk about. And in my podcast, you'll hear Robert say, he just stepped back and said, you lead, which for several of the young women had never seen a white guy, the executive director of a facility running the conference, do that in the moment. So that right there, just the way we were being with each other and holding the space and modeling, like that was a healing movement for what could be possible. And, you know, you kind of think it's like, what's the positive example of what we want? Like we can spend hours talking about microaggressions and this and that, but like that one moment from what Victoria said, people talked about months later, like how he was. So I just was really moved by that. So then what happened was when we got to the open space part, that one conversation, Victoria said, you know, when we were taking topics, she's like, I want to keep that hair conversation going. So I want to do a topic about hair. And so, you know, there was a big front porch. So like, anyone who wants to talk about hair, great, go there. And to me, that's one of those things we would never ahead of the conference said, let's plan out some topics and talk about hair. But 25 women showed up for that circle and it went for an hour and a half. And Victoria said a year later, people are still coming up to her talking about it. One of the people there said, that one conversation about hair was like that helped heal 30 years of trauma I've had about my hair. And yeah, so that was just one of those emergent examples of in this space, the way it was created, the space for the conversation to start on a question and go where the group wanted it to go, and people find each other and talk about what's in their hearts. Like, to me, this is the spirit of the kind of gatherings we need to be doing, because people will find what they need to talk about. We don't always have to plan it all out because we close out all that potential for connection and healing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to just mention briefly that Tom and I first met in connection with an open space. So we're big, huge fans of open space technology here. But I also want to mention that when we had our prep call, and I don't know that this is a pattern that we have already. It will be hearing from Tom in about less than 10 minutes here, but you mentioned positive disconfirming experiences, right? So this example of the director of the nonprofit saying, you lead, right? I think is a beautiful example of that pattern of how can we create experiences, gathering experiences, meeting experiences, conference experiences, organizational experiences where people have positive disconfirming experiences that, rather than re-triggering the old trauma patterns, can really be an example of a different way of doing things. So, and it sounds like that happened a lot.
It did. And even for me, like, I'm someone who started my career in the corporate world, 10 years of management consulting, environmental management, and then a lot of time in sustainability nonprofit. So there's like a certain way you're trained to show up. And it's usually just, as Joanna Macy used to say, a brain on a stick. Like, we don't have bodies, you know, like there's all this stuff you don't really talk about. So for me, like that conference, to have the arts, like to spend the first 45 minutes dancing together and then get into real conversation, and then, you know, have a chance to, like, you know, just be chatting on the porch with people from 5 different generations and different sexualities and races about a really, like, a pretty tough topic, but like just seeing how a space could include all of that, rather than we show up at a conference and we have to be businessy. Like, that was one for me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You, just to mention, you had skipped over the starting with 45 minutes of dancing part.
Oh yeah, that was the second and third day we started with movement.
Second and third day. Wow,
Yeah.
wonderful. So there's a question in the chat from Susan asking about if I'm taking questions for Beth. Well, you know, I can definitely read this out loud, and Beth can definitely speak to it but I just want to go over the structure a little bit more. Please keep track of your questions. You're going to be sharing your questions, comments, thoughts, etc. in the small breakout group. And then when we come back after the breakout groups, we'll all have a chance to participate, talk in the large group. So we're doing no, it's not 1, 2, 4 all, but it's along those principles. But for the moment, Susan is asking about how many people came for 1 or 2 days versus all 3. And maybe you could speak a little bit about what happened when somebody came and it was the second day and how they kind of,
Yeah. I think
landed.
in the end, it was probably about a third of the people were there for all 3 days. And then a fair number came for like 1 or 2, or were on a panel and stayed the day, but didn't make it back, So it was kind of a flowing mix, I would say, through the time. But by doing the panel and the small 1, 2, 4 all, on the second day, we did World Cafe. And then on the third day, we did 1, 2, 4 all again. So I think that allowing people to get into the small groups quickly just made it really easy for them to feel connected and in the flow. Like each day could stand alone and conversations could continue. But that's what I really liked about the format. And I might also mention, Rosa, about the second conference we did. Do you
Oh,
want me
yes,
to?
please. Yeah.
So this one worked so well, and so Greenacre every year at winter between Christmas and New Year's, they do a family camp kind of conference, and it's a pretty huge conference facility. And so they have like 150 families that come and have been coming for years. And it's a 5-day thing with kids at classroom stuff and the adults having their piece and some family pieces. And so they said, wow, can we redesign it to be SeaCHANGE? Because they usually do a lot of lecture kind of stuff for the adults. So in that one, we did the same thing over, and that was really amazing because you had all these people who knew the old way, and then they could just step into this new format. And I want to show you, we ended up with that one back to this sense of giving people that some structure and space. We gave them this chart every day. So we would just say, here's where we are. We're going to start with the open, in that case, they did morning devotional thing. Then we'll do the panel and conversations. Then you'll have a break. Then we do workshops, and then we'll do open space. And so each day was the same. We left a middle day, kind of like a U process of, that work of Presencing Institute. We said that day was a little more spacious, and then one more day in the same flow. And this works so well to kind of help people see, oh yeah, we got space, but you're holding us. And in that one, and we did this at SeaCHANGE too, when we did the small group cafes, we had them write themes on little colored pieces of paper. And then we would make a little chart that we put over the coffee, where the coffee was, showing these are the themes of how you answered that question. So we could reflect back what the themes were people were talking about. And I think I have a picture. Oh, I guess I don't have but we had 3 different questions for family conference. We were drawing on the Baha'is' new initiative, like these new plans they have. So they had what they wanted to talk about. So I spent a lot of time with that design team saying what would be the most potent question. So one of them was like, how can families be a unit of social change? What a cool question. So like that one just, that one just went same process, different questions, and it worked really well. And then, we're doing SeaCHANGE again, August 25th and 27th with 3 new questions. Yeah.
Yeah. So part of what I'm hearing, the outcome of this is that people were inspired to take this process and spread it to other contexts, right? Which is wonderful. And then there is a question here about who the participants were, and you had mentioned that before. I think it's really worth going back a little bit, because you had talked about how there being a good mix of participants was so crucial to the success of the conference. And if you could, and I think this is the participants for the first conference, right? Because
so for SeaCHANGE, it was a lot of I would say probably half the group was young people, like in their 30s or under, who many of whom lived in New Hampshire or Boston, were artists, some social change activists. We also had older folks like in the Baha'i community who are kind of, in that's their spiritual home. We had other like this other guy, Randy Armstrong, who's a local musician, a world musician, who's a Baha'i. So, some of the conversations were sitting there with him in dialogue with young artists. We had poets. Another guy, Richard Haynes, is a painter, pretty renowned painter, African-American person in this region who was there, who'd come to the Baha'i place a long time. So there were sort of local elders, I would say, in the either in the Baha'i or people of color artists community locally. So that was the mix.
Yeah, local elders as well as young artists. And then in the second conference, the families that came were ones who were members of the Baha'i
faith. Yeah. And they would come every year. And
this is their regular yearly conference that got transformed through the inspiration of this arts conference. Awesome. Yeah. Well, with that, Beth, I think we'll take a pause, and unless there's some last minute thing that you want to say, and of course you'll stay with us, and you'll be able to respond a lot more after we hear back from people in the small groups. But now we're going to go to Tom, and Tom, if you'd like to, I'm going to find you here so I can spotlight you. If you would be willing to share your thoughts on the patterns and of the wise democracy pattern language and or co-intelligence principles that you are seeing here.
Yeah. There are so many patterns. We have 96 patterns, and it just goes on and on. As you were talking, I was trying to add more without losing track of what you were saying. I picked out 6 to focus on. I'm trying to just narrow it down, but I will post all the patterns I thought of just for the heck of it, and the link of where to get more information on them. And first, I want to note the prime directive, which is what underlies all the patterns. And the prime directive is to appreciate, evoke, and engage the wisdom of the whole on behalf of the whole. And that feels like it's all over the place. That's dancing everywhere in what you talked about in the conference, how you described it. And a pattern, I'm going to see if I have time. I have a little, clock running to see if I can do this right. The three patterns that are sort of more ordinary and show up over and over again, but were totally characteristic of your conference. Diversity, and the I don't know if I can show sequences.
Oh, yes.
Of pictures.
Yes, I'm sorry. I need to make you co-host, Tom.
So
okay, you can share screen now.
Share screen. And we'll see if it actually allows me to go. So diversity. This is an example of a pattern page. Different kinds of diversity pictured in here. And the pattern heart is a general description of it. So diversity provides a wide range of resources for big picture insight, whole system implementation, and general resilience. Cognitive diversity is especially important for collective wisdom. So consciously include relevant diversity in all forms, and then welcome emergent differences, seeking to use them all creatively. So it feels like this is a compact description of many different dimensions of relating to diversity. But I liked the kind of diversity sensibility that you had in this. It wasn't a simple demographic, cookie cutter kind of diversity. You had a very rich sense of it. Let me see. We have a bunch of them pulled out ahead of time. Another was generating interactions. Can you see that? Did this work? Okay, great. So the most important interactions in a wise democracy, especially conversations, and not all interactions are conversations, are those that generate more wholesome understanding, relationship, and/or possibility. So engage diverse people and perspectives in high-quality social interactions, like DNA strands recombining and sexual reproduction, to produce novel outcomes and serve the well-being of everyone involved. Again, this is a really good description of the conference that you were describing. lots of people interacting, and the generality is that something comes out of it that wasn't there before. And I looked at some of the descriptions of the conference and people's reactions to it, and it was very definitely they were there. It was a big, rewarding thing. Multiple perspective view, and this I took less from your talk than from the people who responded. They were really intrigued with how many different perspectives were being represented. This picture, incidentally, is from a woman, Anna DeVere Smith, who has pioneered one-woman shows with diverse people in different circumstances, being diverse people. Every conflict or issue has at least two self-legitimizing sides, and usually more. Their stories contain energies and information vital to a healthy shared future. So compassionately hear and make visible in a compelling manner the spectrum of perspectives, both to evoke empathy and to help everyone see what needs to be taken into account for truly wise solutions. I feel like that was happening for a lot of people in this conference as they were hearing each other, being able to sort of step into other people's shoes and go, whoa, this has implications. You know? And the next one, which is a key to all your work, powerful questions. And lots of people going, huh. Finding answers is important, but truly powerful questions open our attention and conversation into breakthrough insights and possibilities, evoking powerful life energy. So create powerful questions. So create powerful questions people can live into in ways that generate change with or without being answered, or that yield answers over and over again, like a fruit tree. You talked about the banks of a river. My usually thing is a powerful question is creating a space to explore in. That's very similar kind of metaphor. But the key thing here is in our society, a question is to be answered. There's an endpoint. And in our work, it's a very different kind of thing. We're looking for an opening. A question is a doorway. It's not a, arrival, a destination kind of thing you're trying to get to. Yeah, and I have strategic questioning as one of the resources here. There's many different approaches to powerful questions. Strategic questioning is a particular good one. And then multimedia engagement. So, and this one is interesting because you expanded on my definition, my orientation in this, which I found really interesting. Have audio, video, text, graphics, virtual, real, broadcasting, watching, reading, interacting, sharing, imagine imagery, music, story, poetry, dance, games, drama, performance. This is an usual pattern heart. Conversation, different strokes for different folks and different gifts from each. So understand appropriate uses of each engagement media and their complementary powers to reach and engage more and more diverse people more and more fully. This is great advice from the perspective of you're trying to get people engaged. And these are modes of getting people engaged. But in your conference, it was a different logic. You were bringing people who have these different orientations to just dance together. And it's that multiple kinds of engagement in the presence with each other that is what was so juicy in your world. Good, I'm doing a pretty good time. And the other is proposals and outcomes emergent. The sense that we're not trying to get to X. We're creating a space where ideas and outcomes can actually show up over time. Proposals usually promote arrival at particular outcomes. This often prematurely narrows attention into pro-con responses, amendments, and decisions. So when possible, start with the situation, issue, or inquiry, and treat proposals as data and possibilities en route to greater understanding until a proposal finally triggers a group aha. This orientation is again towards the orientation here shows up my kind of bias in the wise democracy thing towards deliberations where you're taking some issue and you're working at it. And yours, it's not exactly what you were doing. So again, you're kind of stretching the application of this pattern. I think the pattern is essentially valid, but needs, in version 2, we would need to expand, modify this pattern to include the emergence, more generally, the emergence is a desirable, to feed emergence so that the unexpected shows up, has a value of its own. And this is a good description of what it is when you're trying to get a deliberation, trying to get an outcome, a recommendation on an issue or something like that. Yeah, and I'm going to post in the chat. Probably it's going to take 2 sections of post. I'm going to stop the share just to give you a sense of how much other patterns. I also noted that you do lots of whole system stakeholder networking work, which is different from this conference, but which has a lot of these patterns in it. So I'm going to post this first in the chat. That's a quickie, and then I'm going to post a bunch. This will give you the link to where we can find out more about all the patterns. See if I can squeeze them all into one posting. It did. Okay, so you can see, and you can try and pick different ones, keep it down to 6, see if you can do a better job than I could. I kept thinking it's like partnership culture. That's so real. Exuberance, that was totally around there. Safety, well-utilized life energy, self-organization fostered spaces for dialogue and collaboration. Equity. It's just all these things. Fullness of choice was another. Realizing open spaces. As you're talking, I'm going, I should really substitute this for this. I should substitute this for this. And it's like, I can't do that. It's like, it's all fucking important. Anyway.
Thank you so much, Tom. This is a wonderful example of how the patterns really come to life when we have this wonderful experience that illustrates so many of these patterns in use, right? This is just awesome. So with that, I think we are very well prepared to go into our breakout rooms. This isn't exactly a 1, 2, 4, but you've had an opportunity to sit individually with what's coming up for you. And now the groups, yes, Tom.
I'd like to note before going into the rooms, if somebody wants to have what was in the chat, they might want to copy the chat now, because it'll disappear when you come back. Right. It won't be there.
Okay, so we're going to be in breakout groups for 25 minutes. And please, share the time equitably amongst you, and feel free to take notes, any of you who will want to. And the questions again, how does this relate to your own experiences? What connections do you see with your own work? What else do you know that can really generate this kind of powerful experience? And what do you have questions about or would love to hear more about? And with that, great. Welcome back, everyone. My apologies. We ended up doing an impromptu 1, 2, 4 without much warning. But the way the breakout, I'm not usually the person who runs the breakout groups, and the way that it had happened, many of you were in groups of 2 initially. And I thought, well, 25 minutes in a group of 2, like you could have a great conversation, but you may want to meet a few of the other folks here. So hopefully that was not too disruptive. And so we're going to be together for the rest of the time, and just want to invite, people to share some of the highlights of the breakouts for you.
Yeah, in a minute.
Yeah. Jennifer.
I'll see if I can formulate it. We had a really juicy conversation that I'm excited to bring into this around, it was sparked by the question, how can we bring people together using all these modes, using language that doesn't put people off? And then it moved into a conversation that I feel like went into the using diversity and disturbance creatively pattern. And I feel like Beth might have some really useful insights in this, but it's like, if you have people that are coming together either with existing conflict or like really different communities, how do you work with that? And as Beth is hearing from you, it sounds like you were bringing people in with a lot of existing relationships. And so it's sort of a different ballgame maybe than some of the things other people are dealing with. So that kind of had a two-part question, but I hope it made sense.
That's a great question. And the way as I design and help facilitate events, usually in partnership with other organizations or collaboratives, the process we use every time is a design team, where we're trying to get the diversity that we want to attract, work with us on the design team from the beginning. So we get those different perspectives as we shape the framing of the invitation, as we shape the questions, so that we can be aware if something that, from my point of view, seems like it would be great, might be landing in someone else's fields. I mean, one example that came up for me in a time I didn't do it well was I was with a pretty mixed group of funders and grassroots leaders, and we were saying, how can foundations empower grassroots movements? And that's what we put to the group as a question. And a bunch of people who are in the grassroots movements were like, excuse me, our movements have power. You funders over here, like, it's not you're giving us power. We already have power. If you want to collaborate with, like, it just like, I know it was a bunch of us going, ooh, we could have seen that one coming. That empower word like didn't land well. So that would be one answer. Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Jennifer, and thank you for the very thoughtful response, Beth. This is starting with as diverse a group as possible in the planning process is a great way to get educated early.
Mhm.
And then when you can't, being fully honest and transparent about that. We are a group of this, whatever nature we are, honestly, and asking or offering whatever we're asking and offering of others working in the field.
Mhm. Yep. Todd, did you?
Yeah, I have a question. What do you think contributed to we got to go deep so fast, like that trust building where people felt comfortable to go deep? What are the factors that contributed to that? And I'd be interested to hear from others, what other things people do to help build trust and help build trust in these kinds of diverse spaces. So what do you think contributed to that?
Yeah. For me, I think part of it was Najee's personality and Victoria's personality, who were two of our kind of the key people who invited a lot of people. And then also the Green Acre Baha'i community had been a sanctuary, you might say, like that's what I learned that day, for local people of color who were the older folks who had experienced a lot of racism and how hard it was to live here. And I think also because the room was probably more than 50% people of color, and it's a space where they have for many years been able to come and know they would not be judged or hit that kind of, aggressive, like ways you don't feel you belong. So I think it was something in that combination. And then a few people early being willing to speak the truth of what has happened and what was real. And it was like each one that did that, then the next one was a little more like, oh, she's going to go there. I guess we can go there. Like, that's kind of how it went.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was saying in our little group, we're offering it again, and we had decided to move it up till June. And when we were planning it for mid-June, like we had put the word out, but we hardly got anyone signed up because there was too many competing events in June, we realized. And at that point, it was like, okay, we're going to have these panels of people of color speakers, and we're going to have like 15 people in the audience, but we know they're mostly the older people from the community, so like we just said, this isn't going to be the mix we want. And we could feel that it wouldn't get that same quality of participation and trust. So we decided to postpone it till August to make sure we got the mix in the room that would create that similar magic.
Yeah. Thanks. Sounds like the invitation, the personalities, the people that, and then getting things sparked, someone just taking that leap and then going.
Yeah. fire, that's why we call them fire starters.
starters, yes.
Yeah. And I
Yes,
always think it's
yes.
invite a story first, like, you know, if when you have the question, can you share a story related to the question, like that also? Patty Guy says a story is the closest distance between two people, you know, like it gets people in their hearts, and not just talking kind of conceptually. And that I always invite at the beginning of a gathering, either on the panel or in small groups. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Hearing a authentic story of an experience, or, you know,
Yeah.
And you heard three, it sounds like you had three
Mhm.
jump starters, and then like, okay, yeah, good,
Yeah.
good. That's good. Thanks. Yeah.
Flo put a question in the chat about whether the issue of funding came out as a result of the conference, whether for the artists in general or BIPOC artists in general and or specific artists who came to the conference. And if so,
Yeah.
what came of that?
Well, one thing that we didn't fully get was a lot of the people with money to be at the conference. But what I did hear came out of it, for a lot of the younger artists, getting to be in the space with other younger artists who were making their own way as artists, or doing, like Victoria, who you might hear in the podcast, you know, she said through this, she got the confidence to start her creative graphic arts consulting practice, not consulting, like an arts design thing, spurred by all the boosts from this. So I think there was ways that the artists who came, one of the things they said, they felt they were treated so with such like they felt regal, and they were just seen with such, like, I think it boosted up the confidence of a lot of the younger artists at the event. And there was, I think, some of the, like Randy Armstrong, who's a well-established musician, you saw him building relationships with the young people, and he understands how the funding happens more. So it was a lot in the little interactions that happened. I think that movement happened, but plenty more that could be done there. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Susan, you have a...
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Thanks. This is a follow-up. And Beth, again, thank you for this extraordinary example that we all get to enjoy together. The mix, not having the funders there, I guess I'm just curious, you know, we talk about patronizing, and if someone is a patron, they're using patron Oz. So I think not having the artist having to wear that part of their identity, or, you know, because you might say we're all equal here, it's all safe, but just having the smell of the money in the room or too much, you know what I mean? So
Exactly.
I'm wondering if it was maybe better that they weren't there.
It could be. It could be. And I mean, I know this issue of how we flow resources comes up so many places, and you're absolutely right. I often think of it as like the little metal shavings, and when the magnet comes in, and then everything, you know, or things will or won't be talked about. So one of my favorite examples, I was doing a lot of collaborative leadership training with some community, cross-sector community groups in neighborhoods that are underinvested in. And because it came up so much, we actually then worked with them to design a conversation for the funders about how we need the funders to show up differently. So that was a great example of like what came out of all the small groups and like the learning together. We could then take that and invite a different kind of conversation with the funders rather than having them listen in, if that might have changed the environment. So I totally get what you're saying, Susan. Yeah.
Yes, Maria.
Yes, so as I shared in my group, I actually have like a question, or a reflection also from the group. I'm curious to see from the experience of people in the group and this conversation about funders, which is when I was listening to your presentation, my feeling, also because of my own an experience. I tried to launch a group course based on ULab at a business school, private business school in London. And the students rebelled in the last year. So my feeling when I was listening to your conversation and is that in reality is not very diverse. We think that is questioning what is diversity in a way, and is feeling that somehow all this type of work that we are doing here and people are doing, like trying to find these ways to collaborate, to participate, that are moving beyond the mainstream paradigms and moving towards something which is different, more based in collective wisdom, wisdom. So moving from knowledge to wisdom requires like this openness from the participants, which it seems that they are diverse, but in reality they are not diverse. They are ready. There's like this common ground between all of them, because they are ready to go there to dance, or the Baha'i group to to engage in devotional practices. And actually, and my question is like, how do you really, what kind of strategies can we use to really engage with a really diverse, like for example, funders, instead of, because for me that's the chorus of the issues we've got now, isn't it, to tackle the economics. If we don't tackle the economics, it seems that we are being diverse, but we are just speaking with people that are like us. So how do we engage? What kind of experience? This is for everyone, and for me including, because I was working in a business school, as I told my colleague, my people in my group, and it worked more or less with the older students, but working with the kids that are coming from very wealthy families in Monaco, etc., to come to London to study in a private business school accountancy, that was really diversity for me. And it was very difficult. They were not open, like to even much simpler things, even simpler exercises. And I'm remembering another colleague that tried to bring some theatrical exercises of mirroring into a corporate environment. And it was so difficult because people just felt so frightened and so challenged. And I think Slow, you spoke about something. I remember we were in our group of some previous. So I'm just curious. So this is my question. I'm questioning the diversity. I don't feel that it's diverse. It's, I mean, it is diverse, but it's not.
Maria, if I may respond first, I want to just reflect back some of what I'm hearing in your questions, because I'm really hearing a number of different things. One is this bringing forward that there are many different kinds of diversity, right? And there's not just one kind of diversity. And then you talked about the question of readiness, that some of the work that we do attracts people who are ready to do the work and doesn't attract people who are not ready to do the work. So in terms of readiness to do the work, it's not a diverse group, right? And I'm very intrigued by your bringing up this theme for a number of reasons. One is that here at the Co-Intelligence Institute, we're very interested in many different kinds of diversity, right? And so I can really resonate with the value of spelling out what kinds of diversity are we talking about here. So in this particular case, it seems to me like the diversity was between people of color who are artists, and I imagine that there was a number of European American people background in the room too. And in this particular area, part of the country, that's not a usual thing to have kind of equal balanced people of color and European background people. So it's one kind of diversity, but as you're saying, there are many, many other kinds of diversity. And then your question about what are the ways that we can get more kinds of diversity in the room. One of the things that I don't know that we've met before, but if you've met some of the other folks here at CII, that we're really focused here, there's a lot of interest in deliberative democracy. And so in that particular way of working, the way that diversity is ensured is through something called a public lottery, which is people are chosen at random in stratified random sampling to ensure, so it's not people who are volunteers or who want to come. It's actually a really huge effort is made. And even there, right, there are all kinds of interesting questions about, for some purposes, people are experimenting with not just having the makeup of the society as a whole, but saying we should actually oversample for people whose perspectives aren't usually represented, like say in the mass media and things like that. So we should have a higher proportion of lower income people. We should have a higher proportion. So there's just some very interesting questions that get raised when we complexify the topic of diversity. And so I really want to thank you for doing that. And that's my initial response. And now I just want to open it up to whoever else may want to respond.
I have an article on my cointelligence.org website that says not all differences are the same. I could dig out, I'll dig out the link and send it. It's one of these things that the way we think of difference is usually too constrained, regardless of what we're doing and how we're thinking of it.
I don't know how many of you have come across diversity playgrounds, where they're not just for children, but they're for people of all ages, seniors, disabled people. And what seems cool about that is people go there to play.
Julian, that is lovely.
One of the more difficult.
Oh, I was
one
just
of the
gonna...
more difficult diversities.
Go for it, Nancy.
One of the more difficult diversities for us in this context, and it was named by Maria, are the very people.
Are the what, Nancy?
You froze.
Who differ from us in their valuing of this kind of are the people who differ from in their, and it's reading out a conservative that I knew shared with me a concern for climate. And I wanted to create a dialogue between our different perspectives. And he said to me, why talk? Why don't we just do something together? A common perspective among conservatives, as I have experienced it. Then he went on to say, why don't we just feed the poor or do something that matters? And then we can talk while we're doing that. And the question I'm putting out is, how do we in particular create conversations with those that shift our relationships to each other, with those who are initially
Nancy, you still there? Okay. I hope you can reconnect. Julian, I just wanted to emphasize or thank you for talking about play as a different approach than just talking about diversity, but playing together. And I just wanted to mention that on the website, we had Shamichael Hallman, who was a guest presenter back in January, and his presentation was reimagining the civic commons. So things about like, how can we have a library that is designed to bring in people from many different backgrounds, where they're getting together, they're having interactions, not necessarily because they are sitting down to talk about diversity, but because they are taking a practical class on how to, use the equipment for your own sound system to create music at home or whatever, right? Because they have all these different resources that people can check out. So expanding the way that we can interact with each other to move beyond just talking is what I think you're pointing out, that Beth was also talking about, and that Nancy was also talking about, in terms of working on a soup kitchen with one another, etc.
Well, for a dyslexic person, a typical library is not the greatest place in the world to be. So I've been in libraries where it's very diverse, and it's wonderful.
Betty, yes.
So this last conversation was very interesting, and this is a nuance that goes off a little bit that I really found myself a thread I was following, and it was from Maria's comments, and it was, again, I think Rosa, your clarification that diversity could also include the people that are attracted to do the work, right? That you might be bringing in people who are already interested in wanting to do that work. And that got me thinking of that earlier question of how are we feeding emergence, and also titling how we invite people into places and what topics, because I'm sure we've all had the experience. I've had the experience of people coming to a course or a program who may not have known they were interested in that topic before they came. They didn't know what they didn't know. But once they were there and they were engaged in discussion, light bulbs started going off. And that's really promising. And I think if we're really looking at emergence and going, expanding, beyond the people that are already interested in the work, I just wonder if that takes some thoughtful consideration of how we name things and where we go and how we invite people in. If there are real gems there that would benefit a lot of people. So a thought.
Thank you so much, Betty. Just to reinforce what you're saying, one of the such interesting findings in these the citizens assemblies or the citizens councils is people who have been chosen at random and then sent an invitation from the government to say, we would really value your input on this council. One of the most interesting and common things that happens is that, especially, this is from the research I did in Austria on this topic, older women will say, oh, because there's a question that's asked at the beginning, where were you when you got the letter of invitation, and what helped you to decide to come? And so at the beginning, oftentimes older women will say, well, I didn't think it was for me. I thought maybe my husband should go because he knows more about these issues, but then I found out it really was for me, and I didn't think I would have very much to contribute. And at the end, they're saying, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had so many good ideas on this topic, and I'm so glad I came, right? So to your point about light bulbs going off, in that case, it's because people are chosen at random and given this big official invitation. And then in the Irish assembly that they had there, they really wanted to get the randomness going. So in a lot of these, people who respond get to come, and people who don't respond, well, they just pick new people. Well, in the Irish assembly, their big breakthrough was that they would pay people to go and knock on people's doors or to follow them to the pub and say, you don't have to come, but we'd really like to know, why are you not responding to this invitation? It's like they went above and beyond to make sure that the people who had been chosen at random to be included would actually have support and encouragement to come. So I just thought you might appreciate that story.
I'll go find them on the way to the pub.
Yeah, Beth?
Yeah, this is a great conversation. And one of the emerging areas I'm looking at is, we talk about these third spaces, and there's a movement in the US around maker spaces, and maybe global, I don't know, but like maker spaces where you have one hub and you can come and there's a wood shop and a metal shop and a jewelry shop and painting and wool, and so these are popping up in a lot of communities. And I think they're kind of exciting as a third space. And so I'm now in dialogue about how can we bring some of this, relational dialogue culture, community building culture to go along with the space and the programming, because they are getting a mix of people, and it's not not showing up to have a dialogue about this. And my colleague in it said, some of the research with men is actually men do really well side by side conversations, not like we're both working on a project and then we're going to get into a deeper conversation. So I think it's also on us. I kept saying earlier about like, why does it have to be a table? Just that, like, how do we think more creatively about where dialogue can happen and community building can happen?
Thank you. Welcome back, Nancy. We were not able to hear a little bit of what you were saying right as you dropped off. So if you would like to pick it back up from the beginning, that could be really helpful.
I see Lou Regali's hand is up, though. Perhaps he wants to go first, and then I could do that.
Doug, why don't you go ahead?
I was just saying that one of the most difficult challenges for us in diversity is that diversity that rejects or dislikes or is not comfortable with or doesn't see the value of this kind of work. And I gave an example of a conservative that I am close to who's in the climate movement with me. I was reaching out to try to create a dialogue between our two congregations. I'm a Quaker, and reaching out to his more conservative church. And he said to me, why would we talk? But then he went on, and that's very common reaction from conservatives, in a lot of people actually, but he said, why don't we just do something together, like feed the poor? And then we could talk while we're doing that. I was really moved by that, and I'm interested in hearing your experiences in particular in finding ways to make those sorts of connections and build relationships with that diversity.
I cannot sorry.
Go ahead.
Very quickly, it's like another positive example in my university. This is quite positive, actually, is similar to what you said, Nancy. So we launched another program, which was really simple, community engagement. So service learning, putting all these students, and they're quite wealthy students, in soup kitchens, community gardens. So using their hands, they do not have maybe the dialogue, the interest, but they have their hands. So doing things, and really side by side with these people attending these different community centers. And that was, yes, that was quite positive, actually, even though they don't feel what's the purpose of doing that, but some did, some felt something. So it reminds, yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Maria. Lou, did you have something you wanted to offer?
Well, sure. So a little light went off for me here, and that is that what we are all looking for as humans is a connection, or the connection is what's important. Not so much what we're going to learn, but the experience we have with the connection that we have with another human being. And however that is accomplished is that's where I think our attention should go. Anyways, that's what came to me.
Thank you. Slow?
I just, in answer to Nancy's question, I'm experiencing that right now. I'm glad you noted it's not just conservatives but I'm seeing it among leftist, anarchist, whatever kind of activists, and people who are very poor, a lot of them unhoused or homeless. It seems like there's actually quite a lot of awareness of this. And I'm involved in an eviction defense right now. And so that property is rapidly being turned into a community resource, a venue for events. And people are talking about everything from the arts and music and party dancing to workshops and trainings and people making things and cooking for each other. And all of this is mutual aid. None of this is charity, which might be an interesting conversation with people who are thinking, oh, their church is giving or helping these other people. Like it creates a different kind of relationship that way. But it's people, it relates to the thing about funding. People who come and say, oh, let me give to you. This group would not be interested in that. But if you want to come and join us, like, yes, absolutely. And the full multimodality in full recognition that some people just have they're not going to stop and engage in a conversation or anything, but can we find a way to take what they want to do and bring and make it part of what we're doing, not just tolerate it and be okay with it, but actually find a place that what they're doing is received as an offering and a gift, and just another mode of the many that we're practicing together. And then those of us who really love these, like, sit down and talk about it explicitly and do a process, we just have to step back a bit and find that our offering is just one of these many. And we look for and find the organic ways to do it on the fly in little conversations and our spot in the schedule to say, oh, here I'm going to offer a workshop on strategic questioning. And here's a little about what it is. And if anybody is interested, they can come or what have you. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Slow. And thank you for the update on the activist action on the street. Dagna?
Yes, just one maybe example, just not to provoke the discussion, but maybe to understand what's happening. So I would like to bring the topic of Poland, and that I think it was the biggest self-organized movement ever. I'm not sure if it, but this will happen with Ukrainian war and how Polish people organize themselves on a voluntary basis, all people, rich people, poor people, everyone. They would make their own camps and they would divide the roles by themselves. No leaders, no politician guidance. People by themselves collecting food, giving food, distributing, bringing people together. I don't know if anyone did a study. How did it happen? I don't know. It was a miracle. So this is one thing. What made those people to work together in such a harmonious and balanced way, what it tells me that we have a potential as people. We don't have to learn it, we just have to reveal it because we have it inside of us. Then another question, because this wave already passed, the war is still there, but now something has changed. We didn't keep it, we lost it. So there was a massive movement, amazing thing, and then we lost it. We came back to our comfort zones. So another question, I don't have the answer, but maybe there's something interesting to look at and to analyze it.
Thank you so much, Dagna. Just a clarifying question. You said this biggest self-organized movement ever was initially in response to the war in
Ukraine.
And this was a response to help and solidarity in some way to shelter refugees.
It was amazing. In all cities, the people were giving the flats, collecting the foods. Yes, exactly that.
And
thousands of people.
Yeah, huge participation. And so you were saying this is an example that there is an almost inherent possibility in humans to do this. And so what is it that helps to reveal it, not to learn it, because it's not that people have to learn to do something, but to reveal or uncover this potential that's already there. And then you mentioned that after some time, I don't know what the time was, but after some time that was lost. And so then a question of what happened there, or maybe how can it be kept for longer, or just how can we understand more about this phenomenon of this wave of collaboration and self-organization that can happen, and then after some time something happened, and it's, yeah, wow, thank you. Tom, did you?
Yes, there is a book about that capacity called A Paradise Built in Hell. It's about disasters and the way people come together in disasters to help each other out. Look at major earthquakes, the 9/11 attacks, you know, things like that. And it talks about that capacity, and it looks at the way what happens when the official responders work with the people and what happens when they try to block the people. And both and places where it didn't work out so well. So it's a really excellent reference on that subject. And it actually, that dynamic is the roots of the co-intelligence work, which in the Tao of Democracy, in the prologue, I described this great peace march I was on with 1,200 people. And it fell apart 2 weeks after it started in the desert. And the people who were running it top down were going bankrupt, and they took all the support equipment away. And we had to figure out what the hell to do. And 800 people left and 400 people didn't. And there was nobody to lead those 400 people. And they refused to have anybody in charge, refused to throw anybody off the march. So it was 400 people trying to get from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. And 9 months later, we arrived in D.C. with, 1,200 people. And that experience totally changed my life. That was a watershed experience. And that inquiry about what's going on there, how did that happen, is the underlying motivational source of this work that we're all involved in. And I'd be fine to talk to you more about that sometime, but that's just a point of information.
Thank you, Tom. Susan, and I just want to say, we are getting close to wrapping up here, so just like 1 or 2 more comments. Yes.
You're muted, Susan.
I just want to express deep, 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 deep gratitude to all of you. And Tom, I want to bring it back to the deep potency of the prime directive. So all of these different activities and examples are about working with the love of the whole that the whole has for all these beautiful parts of itself. And I think there are a lot of rooms where we're not allowed to talk about love, but community members have different love languages. Someone's love language is the soup kitchen. Some of our love languages is facilitating dialogue, right? And we have all these different love languages. And I think this conversation has helped reinforce for me my faith that I was talking with Nancy about the mitochondria of mutuality. And she said, that's a great metaphor. It's not a metaphor. It's like when we talk about the mycelial networks that are invisible running between us, it's actually not a metaphor. These are like quantum biological realities. And so, Tom, you and the team and the work, I think these gatherings just sort of deepen my faith that we can, how are we feeding emergence? It's like we can talk techniques till the cows come home, but I think, inviting people to go deep is because we're standing in our faith about the whole. So I want to thank you all for all the different ways that you let us gather and feed that faith.
Thank you so much, Susan. That is definitely our intention here, to provide a gathering space, and we're so glad that you are finding it meaningful. That is actually a really good transition. I do want to still have time for Beth and Tom and anybody else who wants to share a brief closing remark, but I just want to say that these calls take place on the last Friday of the month, and they're open to everyone interested in co-intelligence. And if you have found this of value, we encourage you to come back and invite your friends and colleagues. And we also have a link that Tom will be posting in a moment. If you are interested in sharing your work as a guest presenter on an upcoming call, please let us know. And we also welcome any donations you may be inspired to give, as they help us make these calls freely available to all. I also want to take just a brief moment to say that I'm going to be stepping back a bit from the calls. I'll still be here as much as I can, et cetera, but I'm in the midst of a big life transition. So this has been a wonderful inspiration, and I trust and hope that we have had enough of them by now, that there's a little bit of a pattern that has gotten going. And I know that Andy and Natalia and Jennifer and others from the Institute will be helping to keep these calls going. And as I said, I will definitely be around, but I'm not going to be taking a leadership role with this anymore, because it's time to step back and have other people do that. So yeah, Tom just put the donate to CII link is in the chat, and the engage with CII link is in there. And so, yeah, I want to give Beth opportunity for any kind of closing statement. How has this been for you? And Tom?
Yeah, I just want to thank the team. It was just really well set up, and it was very fun to be able to share our current story and have you all reflect back. And it definitely deepened my thoughts about it, in terms of especially what we talked about in the full group. So really grateful to all of you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the story.
Thank you so much, Beth. This has been a treat to have you here. Tom?
Very juicy for me. The work comes alive in these calls, and I have, as a result of the studying Beth's materials and talking with her, I've got 3 new patterns that need to go in the pattern language when version 3 comes out. So there's a lot of mutual learning going on, and I love the conversation on the diversity. What is diversity? It's been a long-term inquiry for me. So yes, juicy. Thanks all for showing up. Really appreciate it. Check.
And yes, thank you to all of you. And gonna open it up now. I just feel very moved by the thoughtfulness of the participation and the comments, and all of your contributions are essential for helping these collaborative gatherings happen. So any last words from anyone?
Just want to echo that. I'm sorry I haven't been participating much this evening. I'm not very well. But I've been here listening in the background, and it's just been a really lovely conversation to listen to. And thank you, Beth, for your contribution. Yeah, and we're going to be continuing this. So yeah, we'll be letting everybody know what's going to be coming up next. I don't think we have something down yet for July, but we'll get that sorted out. Thanks.
Get well.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I can't hear you. I see you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Very good to be with you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Beth.
Carry on, everyone,
Yeah.
please.